and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You remain standing. John Schlotsky's going to open us with prayer.
Dear Lord, thank you for an opportunity for us to come together again to do the town's business. Thank you so much that we live in one of the greatest countries in the world. Help us to keep it that way, and that we can find new hope and a common bond that keeps us together. Bless those who protect us both home and abroad, and keep us all safe. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. We have a motion to approve the minutes from January 8th.
Motion to approve the minutes from January 8th.
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5 affirmative. And a motion to approve and ratify the fund report and docket from 2/5.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by John Purdy.
A second.
Second by Chad. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5 affirmative. Okay, the levy appeal process. Adam.
Good evening. Appreciate you all inviting me here to provide some general information this evening. First up, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
So I wanted to talk through just from a general information perspective. I know when we did the last fiscal plan, there was some conversation around the levy appeal process and those types of things. So what I wanted to try to do this evening, at least in a general sense, was to define some terms and also just provide sort of a lay of the land with respect to different options you have around the levy. So the first is I'll define, at least in my terms, how I've come to think about even the term levy, because it is an abstract term and it's thrown around, it's used in budgeting quite a bit, and so what it essentially is, I think about it actually I think about it the best in a pre-property tax cap world. So if you go back 20, 30 years in Indiana, there's no tax caps on properties. So individual units, schools, towns, libraries, counties would pass their budget, and that budget would approve a tax rate and the total amount of their budget that they're going to levy upon homesteads and properties within their jurisdiction. Okay, and pre-property tax cap, that was as long as that was a legally binding and adopted budget, those amounts were aggregated together, and that's what created the tax bills for a given property. Well, you can imagine that created, sort of an uncapped world, and that led to situations where the state legislature stepped in eventually and said, nope, there are going to be statewide limits based on the use of property, and that's what we hear you heard referred to us as like a 1%, 2%, 3% caps and circuit breakers, and all that kind of stuff comes out of that legislation. The term levy, though, existed before and is still used today, and what it really refers to is the amount of property tax that is quote-unquote levied upon assessed value of properties within a special taxing district or within a jurisdiction, okay? So in a post-tax cap world, that certified amount of working levy that goes to your general fund, streets, public safety, etc., that amount can only grow by one way before adjustments, and that is through the state maximum levy growth quotient. Each year, that is an amount that the state provides all units. There's been recent legislation that has capped that to be no more than 4% per year. Okay, so in other words, your normal levy for the purposes of paying staff, paying light bills, paying insurance, kind of operating the town as it is, and state law is going to grow by essentially 0 to 4% per year, almost entitled. Okay, I'll get into some of the options there, but that is sort of the backdrop. So let me pause there. Is that any questions generally? We're going to have that sort of definition at least on the same page as I add a few of the terms. So far, so good? Okay. So when we hear levy, think about that as the total amount of property tax that we can apply. Now, there are other ways that the levy can be increased above the state maximum 4% per year. So in those cases, you have things such as your special cumulative fire fund that you have a cumulative capital fire fund, and then to the extent the town ever has any municipal debt service or debt levy, those are all additions to that, what's referred to as the normal max levy and the working max levy. So the normal max levy is that slug of dollars that can grow by 0 to 4% per year. And then those adjustments, specifically like the cumulative fire fund, cumulative capital fund, and debt levy, are approved by council, and if approved, added to that maximum amount. Okay? So really, other than that, you're in the appeal world. Okay? So anything above and beyond those adjustments, what they can produce, there are a few different levy appeal opportunities that each year, approximately by October 21st, as part of your normal annual budgeting process, you can, as a council, entertain. There are essentially four. One is annexation, correction of an error, growth, and fiscal emergency. Each one of those are a distinct application. Each one of those have certain triggering and qualifying events. I should also say that they are unique in that even if they are approved and advertised accordingly and done and approved at the local council level, they are still subject to external Department of Local Government Finance final review and approval. It goes into, if you've seen like the 1782 notice and that final budget order process, it kind of works its way into that process. And that's essentially it on the levy side. So you have, as far as trying to increase it or maximize it or optimize it, from a maximization perspective, it's really looking at, okay, are you first and foremost pursuing the max levy appeal, getting that 4% entitlement? There's certain things you have to advertise and do to make sure you qualify for that. Secondarily, it's a process to look at those four different qualification-based appeals to say, do we have a qualifying event that would merit us being able to at least consider these? Growth being one, annexation being another, are the two most likely candidates in your case. Third would be a situation of, are we maximizing the other entitlement funds that we can take advantage of to actually just increase our working levy, and that would be maxing out your cumulative capital fund, maxing out your cumulative fire fund, and considering over time the prudent use of a debt service levy. Okay, those are all ways that you can control at the council level additional kind of property tax revenues. Okay, in a general sense, what I can tell you is most growing towns and cities try to manage to a tax rate. So generally speaking, they're trying to maintain a tax rate over time through periods of growth. Okay, that's just a general approach that we see fairly successfully. I should also say, just for good notes, it's not necessarily a 2-to-1, but in some cases, in some counties, it can be. Johnson County is one in which it's closer to this. There is about a 2-to-1 benefit here when you're talking adjustments to levy, because local income tax and miscellaneous state intergovernmental revenues are distributed to the units as a pro rata share of levy. So if you increase your levy or you maximize it, there's essentially a 2-for-1 opportunity on revenue there. For every % more of the total levy in the taxing district that the Whiteland represents, you then get a larger % of the total pie for the share of local income tax, as well as a pro rata share of commercial vehicle excise tax, license excise tax, and financial institution tax that pass through the state of Indiana. Before I move on to a little bit more on the annexation, I know I've covered a lot. Is there any questions there?
I wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
On growth and annexation, those two things, because those are two things we are going to go through now. Annexation and the growth could be a multi-annual thing. Is this something that if we applied for the appeal, we would have to continually do that? Because let's say they grant it and you get X amount of dollars this year, well, you may still need that X amount next year. If you don't, does that go away?
Yeah, great question. So I would say of the 4 different types of annexation, or 4 different types of appeals, there are the only one that has or there's 2 that have a time component to it. And that's specifically the assessed value growth, because it's looking at a trailing 3-year period of time. And it is a year-by-year calculation looking at the prior 3-year trailing average, okay? So it is a year-by-year decision, but it is looking at a 3-year period of time, okay? So in that case, you may qualify this year and not for the next 2, or you may have qualified last year but not for the next 3, okay? Just based on how the average is. And it's specifically comparing the town's 3-year average versus the state of Indiana's average. And there's a certain ratio that you have to kind of qualify for there. And if you qualify, then you're eligible for that year only.
Okay.
Okay? Annexations is a bit different because the reality is most annexations are farmland and they're being talked about being developed, right? So you have this kind of unique situation here where the state allows your levy to adjust based on the percent of the net assessed value of the annexed land as a relationship to your total automatically, but the reality is a lot of times that is trivial because it's agricultural land.
Mm-hmm.
The appeal comes into play in that you have essentially 4 years, effectively a 5-year window of time from the period when the first costs are incurred to where if you have an annexation that is ag and then eventually becomes commercial and there's a big uptick in the service, there is a 5-year window of time from the annexation from when the first costs are realized that you can request an appeal for that annexation. If you don't do it within that window of time, that annexation is effectively locked out and it just becomes a max levy issue. In other words, the most extreme example, you annex and there's a recession and the development pulls back and they pause for 10 years. Well, you're not going to have the cost to do the annexation. You're not going to appeal the levy because you're not having this big increase in police and fire yet. They come back, trade hands, whatever, then develop at year 8 or 10. Now all of a sudden you're past that window and you're managing that neighborhood based on just your normal budget and levy.
Okay, thank you.
So the major, I guess, takeaway from that would be annexation, I continue to say, needs to have really careful fiscal planning, both at the town level and specifically as it relates to the assumptions and service cost in the development timelines. We want to make sure those are really realistic and really conservative on both sides so that the timing occurs within reason of when the development timing occurs within reason, and also if we're trying to get it within that five-year period of time so that you have that appeal capability at least to consider.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
So the maximum levy is a number, not a percent. It's not a percentage of the value of the property in the town. So it's a number, it's a plug number essentially.
Yeah, that's right. One way I have heard, this is an overly simplified example, but it helps to illustrate that point. You can think about it as a large ownership due. It's a plug number that is assessed out, and then as a result of the assessed values at any given time, the millage rate is the kind of comes out of that, right? So the total levy divided by the total assessed value of the town, the result of that is the tax rate that you bill on all properties.
Okay. So that doesn't automatically take into account increases in assessed values.
Correct. Yeah, the levy is completely independent. So
Okay.
in other words, for the math-minded folks in the room, if your levy grows at 4% per year, that plug can inflate by 4%, but your assessed value goes up 40%. Your tax rate is the output of that equation. So if the numerator goes up by 4% and the denominator goes up tenfold, the tax rate's gonna come down.
So, and I'm going somewhere else with this, but then if the levy has been a plug number in New Whiteland for years, why has my tax bill as a homeowner in New Whiteland gone up so much?
Well, they're not the only person on your bill.
Gotcha, okay,
You're probably less than like a third of the bill.
gotcha, okay. Well, so to circle back, so that plug number, that maximum levy, you talk about the 4%, we only get that 4% if we appeal to get it, correct, or does it automatically?
It is neither. It is entitled, but you still have to adopt through it and advertise for it through the normal Form 3.
Okay, so if we do nothing, we take no action, we get no benefit for that?
Correct. So there are communities, I don't know what, you could technically adopt you could adopt a budget that has lower than the max levy. You can do that. So you could adopt a budget technically that has $0 in levy. You're levying zero property tax. On the other end of the spectrum, any given year, the state's only going to allow you a 4% increase in that number. Okay, so you can adjust it. You can pass a budget with 0% change in your levy. You can reduce it by 80%, or you can only increase it by 4%. So in the extreme example, if labor is 90% of your levy, and your labor cost with insurance goes up 8%, the state's telling you that number can go up 4%. Doesn't matter, it can go up 4%.
Right, okay.
Do you necessarily get the 4%?
Good question. That is the gross levy that can be adjusted. Where this gets more complicated is that just because the gross levy goes up 4% does not mean the net levy goes up by 4%. So an extreme example, if you're already at the tax cap, if my property is already at the 1% cap, whatever you do with your levy means nothing to me. I'm not going to pay anymore. I'm going to just pick up a larger share of the circuit breaker.
And that's what happens midway through a budget year when we realize we're not going to get as much in our share as what we thought we were going to.
That's right.
That's the reality of the circuit breaker.
That's right. Because if you think about it, your total tax rate that you're a part of is over 2%, like 206, 210, something like that. And so a 1% property is largely already over at the cap. So you're really only under in like retail commercial situations. So you're exactly right. That 4% is the gross levy. So in simple terms, you had $1 million levy up by 4%. That extra $40,000 is subject to circuit breaker. So any given property that's already at their cap will not see a dollar increase as a result, and therefore you won't see a full 4%.
So when DLGF approves our budget, does DLGF then approve the levy, or is the levy, if we apply for it correctly, is the levy going to be a 4% increase each year, but we may not collect all of it because of the circuit breaker effect? Is that how it works?
That's right. They approve the levy, the gross. They approve. The DLGF approves the tax rate and the gross levy. The auditor puts that on tax bills and says, well, this property is a rental, this property is owner-occupied. They go through the property by property application of that billing, and the result of that is the net. So if nobody was at the circuit breaker or circuit breakers did not exist, you increased by 4%, you would get 4% if everybody paid their tax bill. Because you have some percent of your properties that are already at the tax cap, you're not going to see the full 4%.
And so where this well, two questions. So if we were to appeal now and our maximum levy would go up, everybody's tax currently in town would go up along with it. That's a fair statement?
Up to the cap.
Right, to the extent they're not already at the caps.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't necessarily want to do that. I look at our budget and our needs, and I don't think we need to raise taxes at this point. But we've got 400 homes coming into town. That's not going to automatically affect our maximum levy, correct? Unless we appeal?
Correct.
Okay, so I would assume you'd recommend that once those homes begin to be developed, I mean, there's nothing there now, so there's nothing to appeal.
That's right.
We should appeal our levy.
It's hard for me to sit here and say I recommend, one thing or another without fully looking at it, but I would say in the spirit of trying to maximize revenues for the town, the only opportunity you're gonna have to really kind of create meaningful receipts off of that development is to pursue it.
Right. Well, and I'm not so much thinking maximize revenue for the town,
Okay.
but cover the additional expenses.
Sure.
You know, we're gonna have additional roads to maintain, we're gonna have to hire a police officer, fire department. There's gonna be real true expenses because of those homes.
The tricky part with annexation too, especially new development, is that, you know, if you chart out the life cycle of a neighborhood, your costs aren't front loaded. So what's really easy to do is be like, oh, that's not gonna be that big of an impact because the trees are young, the
Right.
streets are new,
Right.
they're brand new homes. But plot that same neighborhood out 40 years, when they've trained hands, their rentals, the streets need to be
Right.
replaced, the trees are dropping all kinds of leaves. So you have to, the tricky part with annexations is you have to be really forward thinking in what the total life cycle cost of that neighborhood is gonna be.
Because 5 years outside that annexation, we can't appeal anymore.
Yes, sir, it's 100% right.
We're dead in the water.
But you can project out. So if we 3 years from now decide to file an annexation appeal, that appeal can be based on projected costs out over a longer period of time, not
Yes.
just the cost we incur right out of the gate.
That's all true, and your window of time starts from when the first cost is incurred.
By the town, no matter what that is,
Yes.
no matter how minimal that might be, that is what sort of makes us eligible.
Yes,
But even then, the 5-year clock starts running from the date of annexation.
yes.
Okay.
So, as you can imagine, annexation, especially when it comes to levy appeal, is super nuanced. There's a lot of details here that I am just kind of glossing over for simplicity. But I would say you just need to add it to your annual kind of budget discussions to say, if there's been a recent annexation, it just needs to be a budget conversation, no different than you would a department. To be like, okay, have we had any sort of annexation changes? Okay, what's the outlook for that? Did we see any sort of immediate cost impacts? And that would be, I would think, a good prompt to decide if you need to do this. The other thing to remember is any appeal, levy appeal, has to be advertised as such. So it really needs to be, that thought has to happen usually a month or two before it usually gets to council, which is another thing we usually see at common pitfalls, is that by the time people start thinking about wanting to do it, it wasn't on the Form 3, and therefore they essentially kind of ruled themselves out. So a takeaway for your budget group would be to make sure that you're advertising in those years that you want to consider it. It has to be advertised appropriately as well.
So,
Go ahead.
no, I'm just thinking when we start working on, say, the 2027 budget, right, probably need to pick this back up again.
Yep.
At least from
Yeah.
the annexation side of it, yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Well, do we want to wait that long? Because we've got 2 others over there that we've already annexed.
That's the question that I was
That-
Good.
We didn't,
Good point.
we didn't do
That's right.
anything.
We're
with
still
it.
within the 5 years. Yeah.
Well, that's where I was gonna get. The last time you were here, you said last October, we would have had grounds to appeal already.
Different type of appeal, so we're still talking, that was the growth appeal. So, and there's 4 different types of appeals. We just talked about the annexation appeal. The growth appeal is the one that goes in a 3-year period of time, and that is a 1 year by 1 year.
So that, for the houses that already exist, we'd have to look back 3 years?
Yes,
And that's look back 3 years on what? On expenses?
on assessed valuation.
Assessment,
So
okay, which
last-
clearly has increased.
Yeah, last fall, you qualified. Yeah, you qualified mathematically for the 3-year growth appeal.
Because of those two new neighborhoods?
Because of how the town's actual certified net assessed value had been growing relative to the state of Indiana.
Would you anticipate we'd be able to appeal this October as well?
It's tough to say. You know, you had a really big, so it's a 3-year average. You had a large percent increase, I think it was in the pay 24 cycle. So that's gonna stay with you in the average for 2 more cycles.
Right.
So there's a, you know, it's hard to put a percent to it, but I would say there's there's a reasonable chance that this year you have, the reason I have some like gray area is, while I could give you the town's number tonight, I have no idea what the state of Indiana number is gonna be. That comes out later this year, and that is the number we have to kind of benchmark to.
Does that have to do with assessments? Is
Yes.
that the, okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially the statewide average. Effectively, the state's basically saying, okay, you grew, but how did everybody else grow? And if you didn't grow higher than a certain amount of the average, then they just kind of group you in everybody else. But if you can prove that you're growing at a faster rate than the average community in Indiana, then that's what creates the opportunity to pursue a levy appeal because of growth, excess growth.
See, and one of the things I think I misunderstood the first time we talked was if we increase that levy, there's no way to increase that levy without increasing the homeowners, or the property tax on everyone that already owns property in town. Is that, because at this moment, I don't think we need to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want my taxes to raise. I don't want anybody's to, because I don't think it's necessary today.
Yeah, couple things to consider there would be, the hard part with this is what would you think 10 years from now, right? Because I mean, the hard part is that if a future council 10 years from now is in need and during periods of growth, you don't take advantage of those tools, you don't get to look back on that, right? Like it's similar to the annexation in that once that window closes, at least that window has closed. I can tell you that I worked at a city that through its major growth cycle, they did not pursue growth appeals when they were eligible, and what that left them with is they were a very large city with a very low tax rate. Now, while that sounds really good, for a lot of reasons, it means that like essential services, were constrained. So I would just say, from a purely budgetary standpoint, all I would recommend is you build in the process to review it, you build in the process to make sure you're monitoring if you qualify, and then let it be a council decision each year as part of your budget process to decide if you want to do it. That's all I'm really suggesting, is that you just build out the process to make sure that if you do qualify, council hears about it.
And when, as far as the calendar is concerned, would you say we should be looking at that?
Yeah, no later than September 1st of each year.
But we've got to appeal by October
21st.
That's enough time?
That's about, I mean, you have to do it by the 21st. The reason I'm saying September 1st as the drop, kind of the final date, would be, it has to be on Form 3, and your Form 3 would go around that time, the second week or so of September typically. The state's numbers don't even usually come out until the end of August. So you could be kind of thinking about it in August, but the reality is we're not going to really be able to compute anything until September.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I would consider it is each year as part of your budget cycle, you're evaluating this stuff, and like I said, if you qualify, it's presented to council as an opportunity, and then each year each council gets to decide if they want to do it or not, but at least you don't systematically miss out if you qualified and needed it as well. Because unfortunately, with more so the growth appeal is, if you go through a period of growth and are just completely clueless that this is even an opportunity,
right? Shame on us. Yeah, shame on us.
It's into the story. There's no rollback, opportunity.
You said we haven't applied for an appeal twice, and I know the 16 years I've been here, there's been a lot of growth that I know of. There has never been any type of appeal.
I checked back everything I could do, and it looks like the town, for the most part, has been able to take advantage of like the state max levy, the normal levy, but I could not see anywhere where a levy growth appeal has been filed.
John is saying he doesn't think there's a need to collect more taxes now.
Yep.
You make the point, I guess, about Greenwood not having seized the opportunity on a growth appeal when they could have and fell behind.
Yeah.
As a strategy, would it be possible to do the growth appeal to capture whatever benefit there is from that, and a current council who doesn't want to impose higher tax not request the full 4%? So in other words, we grab what we can. So we move ourselves up to
We
the
move the- we
line,
move
but
the
in this
levy up.
year, we asked for a lower than 4% increase in our levy, so that we're not leaving anything behind that we would want in years to come, but we've lost it.
Right.
But we're softening any effect of that by not increasing by the full 4% that we're allowed to each year anyway. Is that a strategy that?
It'd be an excellent strategy, but it's not workable. The certified levy is at what's adopted. So so that is in theory happening within what you're entitled to versus what you're eligible for. And then the question is, well, what did you adopt? So like, for example, if, for 2025's budget, had you gotten the 4% state growth, you could have adopted a budget that was 0 growth. If I'm understanding the kind of strategy, it would be like, well, we still have that 4% sort of independently calculated, but we were choosing a lower amount. That's not the way it would work. This year's base levy then, this year's 4% would go into would be the adopted levy, which didn't include the 4%. So they compound. And if you don't adopt it, it's not going to be there to compound. So it is effectively like what you adopt is the levy that is then the next year's base levy for the calculation.
So to go kind of piggyback off what Lee's asking and what John was talking about, let's say we have the 4% max that everybody gets.
Yep.
We do the appeal. I'm just going to throw a number out because I don't even know what would be realistic. Let's say the appeal says we're going to give you another 2%.
Sure.
Do we have the authority to say, thank you very much, we're happy with 1%?
Excellent. That is correct. So in the case, for example, one we did last year, they got the 4% and their calculated share was then 17% above that. Okay, so which kind of proves the point of why these appeals happen. They were growing 17% faster than the revenue was enabled, but they decided not to take the full 17%. So that is 100% correct. So that would work back to what Lee was suggesting, where once you're qualified, you do not have to take the max there. The same rule applies. What you can adopt anywhere between 0 and that full amount. But whatever you adopt is then the next year's base for its calculation.
So just because we appeal and we get approved for the appeal, we could say 0, but it gets us in the pipeline, so to speak, of we've done the work.
We lose it though at the end of the year, because if we adopt something lower, we lose everything else. We would have to appeal the next year in order to.
That's correct. I mean, what I was getting at is if you qualify for a growth appeal that going back to your example, you've got the extra 2%. As long as you adopt the 1%, it's yours.
Okay.
Okay. But you don't get to carry the 2% in the future years. It's
Okay.
whatever you adopt.
So here's my ignorance. When you say adopt, you mean that's the budget we submit?
Yes.
Okay.
And so lot in annexation, takeaway there would be on annexation, I would just think about it as a department in your budget cycle, and just be kind of prompting yourself to think about, what's going on. And then in cases where it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, we need to hire a new police officer, we're going to do this, that would be the compelling event to then say, we need to advertise, we need to pursue an annexation levy appeal. On the 3-year growth appeal, slightly different. I would not wait for a prompting event. I would look at calculate that every single year, and when you qualify, bring that to council, fully advertise it, create the opportunity for council to be able to decide if you want it or not. Last we talked about any sort of levy increases, other benefit on local income tax and state miscellaneous revenues. The only point else that I have that I wanted to cover is, all of this is pointing to, having a good sort of plan, and I am not a big fan of 10 and 20-year plans. I'm happy to tell you tonight at the podium, I don't think they're worth paper they're printed on. But I am a huge advocate of 2 to 3 year kind of rolling plans. they're still guesses, and the reality is they're still going to be wrong, but they certainly provide opportunities to have less surprises. And to the extent then it makes you have conversations about, like, what does staffing look like 2 to 3 years out? What are the key projects we need to fund and, work through the next 2 or 3 years out? So I would highly suggest, if you don't already have something in the works there, I would definitely suggest trying to elongate your budget planning window to like a rolling 2 or 3 year horizon, so that it's less of a year-to-year thing, and it's more of a, like, what can we do, what can we accomplish in the next 2 or 3 years, and then the budget is really just a formal approval of each plan there. And I think the reason I'm suggesting that in the light of this whole conversation is that with the rate of growth that you are seeing, and the fact that you have staffing concerns on the horizon and service concerns on the horizon as these annexation requests are coming to you, I think trying to push your planning, to a 2 or 3 year period of time is going to just give you all more visibility to when these things come up, so that it's less of a how do the numbers look this year. It's more of saying, okay, well, the numbers look good now, but in 2 more years we're going to have X, Y, Z more staff or whatever. Okay, just a general recommendation. Any questions for me?
Well, the downside is I'll forget half the details by next week, but it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Just generally, and I know you need to get on your way, but I think we've all learned through this annexation process that there's not a windfall, there's not a big economic, or any, for that matter, economic benefit to be derived from annexation. And I guess to confirm that, because maybe more are coming our way, our requests are, other than having the control, the planning and development control of new annexed territory, what is the incentive for a municipality to take in more ground?
Yep.
And the utility benefit, the added customers, what is it?
So I will box myself in purely on financial, because there are certain demographic, voting, and political boundary lines that are well outside of my expertise, but there are certainly considerations there. So looking specifically at a financial, and more specifically a whole of town financial, so that would bring in utilities, development, etc. You can think about, the reality is, in a neighborhood is particularly challenging because you have a lot of new homes, potentially families that are going to want parks and services and all that kind of stuff from day one, as opposed to a commercial or industrial facility that only operates third of the day. There are different service provision costs on those, the AV per acre, all that kind of stuff. So kind of simplifying some of that for the sake of tonight, what I would tell you is where you see the biggest financial benefit are in situations where that annexation happens to also be within a TIF district. Yeah. Then all of a sudden you're going from taxing at the town rate up to the district rate. You have a situation where the base AV is ag and the incremental AV is the new development. So you can see a significant capturing of the real estate tax in those situations. To the extent you have impact fees or new utility customers, certainly there's some incremental revenues there. And to the extent for your cumulative fire and your cumulative capital development funds, those are essentially a dollar for dollar revenue increase as well, based on the new assessed value. Everything else, you're really looking at probably break even at best with respect to what that neighborhood's going to produce, just based on the fact that they're within the normal levy, and unless you appeal it, you're not going to really see this major difference. So I would say, generally speaking, if it's eligible and it makes sense and you can pass the but-for test, redevelopment areas would increase the numbers dramatically, followed by cumulative capital, impact fees, utility fees, etc.
And we could do a TIF district for residential development. Yeah. It kind of wanders away from what they're supposed to be about, but it works, right?
Yep, it does. Yep, and there's some specifics there on like what type of use and those kind of things, but the current law, there's, I don't know the exact section off the top of my head, there's the legislator coming out of COVID created, I think it has to be through 27 or 28, that essentially any for sale, single family residential can be in a TIF in Indiana right now, for the next few years.
There's not much of a negative though. I mean, there would be a negative if you apply your tax, like if you appeal your tax levy, you know, like the town really shouldn't be losing money if they're appealing.
That's right. If you,
Okay.
yeah, so like, I always take things to like an extreme, because I think, especially in local government, there's plenty of nuance. So the extremes kind of help create some guardrails. Let's say you annex 5,000 homes, you don't go through any sort of appeal, you know, you just kind of push on through, right? And at some point in time, you've got to plow the streets, do the leaf and limb. You are going to get police and fire runs there, right? So the most extreme example where you didn't do any of the levy adjustment processes, well, you're going to get the 4% adjustment to your certified levy, and you're going to be able to live fine up until the point that becomes a problem, right? And up until the point where you get to a situation where that amount of levy just simply cannot staff the organization to handle that servicing area, i.e. the city example I mentioned where they went through that decade and a half of growth, did not pursue these appeals. They were left with a bigger area and did not really adjust the levy along the way. Does that help?
Yeah, basically not much of a negative annex as long as you're doing the appeal that you should.
And mostly, yeah, another example would be like, if there was no servicing costs, like if you just had robots out there and you just could basically not have any additional town resources thinking about that neighborhood, it would be a net gain. So that really the only downside is to the extent of what's the immediate staffing and operational costs to go, you know, serve that new area. And if that is higher or lower than the incremental gain, and that's essentially what those fiscal plans look at, is it's trying to estimate, okay, what's the new service expense to service that area versus what's the incremental revenues going to be, and does that create a net deficit or a net surplus?
Any other questions? Nope.
All right.
No, you've got somewhere to be, so.
Yeah, but I know I can talk about this stuff all night. I know it's nuanced, it's hard to do. It's hard to do this stuff in generalities. Okay, so I appreciate you just kind of hearing me out. But if there's anything else we can help you with, just let us know. Otherwise, wish you a good rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Alrighty. Liability insurance, Matt.
Do we need to see if anyone's here for the rate increase, or did you do that already when I wasn't paying attention?
Yeah, I meant to do that. Is there anybody here that came tonight particularly for the rate increase public hearing?
Okay, good.
Okay, that
Just
has
be
been
sure.
taken off the agenda for tonight, so if you were here for that, I want to let you know you can leave if you want, so. Okay, go ahead, Matt, thanks.
All right, so on the liability insurance, at our last meeting, we had 3 of the brokers come in and kind of give you their opinions, their thoughts, things like that, and just needing your guidance. On top of that, I know Mayfield had gave us a quote before. They actually had to give us an updated quote as it was, I call it, expired. So they had to give us an updated quote, and I believe you guys have that to look over. But I guess just need some guidance from you on the way you want to move forward. I guess if it's accepting this or what it is you're wanting to do.
Remind us of the dollar savings with the Mayfield quote over Epic.
So, Angela, I've seen the email. I think we said to me late on what we spent with Epic. I see, was it 170 some thousand? Is that what it was? What we spent?
Yeah, it was for all of
Basically,
that was prior to the, I just picked Epic and sent you for the year. I remember from the last meeting, and it's in the minutes, what was said was that the Tokyo Marine quote was roughly 20,000 less than what.
That's often if your total was, did you say 170?
That's what I think the email you had sent me, but I don't know. I didn't understand the numbers you had
more than what the renewal was.
And I will tell you, I emailed, Jackie and, John, I think it was middle of last week, to see, basically, I wanted to get what that cost was, and I have yet to hear from them. Because last time I ever remember hearing it was back in last July, when they come to you, as far as that goes. So I don't know that number offhand, other than what.
If I remember what I read in the email today, your updated quote was about a $12,000 and something savings.
Well, I don't know, because I don't know if your total is 170 something. I mean, my total, now this doesn't include your work comp, which I think your worker compensation is around 22, I think. But our package premium and your cyber, I have a total of 122,950 for the year. So, and I have copies of these revised if you guys.
Right, and I think you guys.
Do you have those? You don't have those?
Yeah, I had the email.
If you want to pass this down.
Please.
And I know you sent that information earlier this week, and I simply
Oh,
haven't
that's all
had a
right.
chance, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but my recollection was it was about a $20,000 savings that went down by about $4,800. Is
Right,
that,
that's what I was thinking, and I know that, I don't think on the comparison that was sent out, I think it basically just kind of compared,
coverages?
you
Yeah.
know, coverage, basically, I don't know that it had a cost on it, but, yeah, that's kind of what I was doing, somewhere around $20,000 savings.
Okay. But I think the quote that you got us to replace that quote went up about how much? $4,800?
35.
Okay, so it should be a 16.5 savings.
Okay.
And, you know, at least as far as I see it, I mean, obviously tell me if you think I'm wrong. There's two approaches. One was what, I don't remember the name of the outfit. Gibson said, you know, let's step back from the whole thing, start completely over, pick a broker, then have the broker go out and look for that quote. My assumption on that is probably because most of the people that can quote us as a municipality already have, and Gibson therefore couldn't get into the game. Are you from Gibson?
Yes, sir.
What part of that, I see you shaking your head no, what part of that did I get wrong?
No, it's just that, we're not sure what carriers have been pursued yet. May I?
Briefly, sure.
Just want to reiterate, again, David Wheatley from Gibson, thank you. I want to reiterate what we brought last time and what my competitor John Harmony from Epic said. It is in the town's best interest to select a broker first, not to get tied up with carriers. The way that we got to this point where you all were considering a change was because of a turbulent relationship with the broker, right? They showed up the day before looking at vehicles and you got a huge jump in your premiums. That's a broker issue. And with a growing town like this, spending what you do on premiums, it is best to select a broker first. It's in your best interest. It's a little short-sighted. It's not very strategic to just be wooed by a carrier or a specific quote. We could go out and get a quote too. I would recommend looking at the things that are important. Market share, how much they deal in municipality, where they're located in the market, what's their process, what kind of risk management tools do they have in-house, not carrier stuff, broker stuff. Now, taking my Gibson hat off for a second, just as a guy who lives in Johnson County and knows insurance, this is your best move. Even if it's not Gibson, if it's Mayfield Epic or somebody else, I would just highly suggest, when we met with Matt and Angela back in October, they agreed, hey, we've been dealing with broker problems. It would be best if we put the carrier stuff, the quotes aside, and looked at who we would like to represent us in the market based on the broker's characteristics.
Okay.
And that's what I would suggest.
Okay. If I've thought a lot about this since the last meeting, and I liked some of what you had to say, okay? But here's my issue. We are responsible for their money, okay? They've come in and they've given us something, a quote, that says we can save you X amount, 16,000 a month, okay? If we go by what you say and we pick a broker, there's no guarantee that you don't come back and say, oh, sorry, it's 20,000 more than what it was. I would rather have seen, something, because right now, you're asking us to go based on what we hope will happen against something that we know will happen. Does that make sense? I mean, that's my concern.
And that's kind of where I am too. It's almost a bird in the hand because
Exactly.
we know there's
Exactly.
16.5 on the table that we can capture. And then we can take time to decide if we want to take the approach that Gibson's recommended that, okay, let's talk to brokers first. It really, and maybe it's not apples to apples, and maybe the two of you would give me the same answer or a different one. When I shop my homeowner's insurance, I go to 3 or 4 different brokers and I get a separate quote. I don't say, okay, I really like Dean. Dean's going to be my broker. Go find me somebody. I shop it with as many places as I can because that's how I check on Dean.
Respectfully, sir, you're not spending $120,000 on your home insurance.
Well, of course not.
It's way more nuanced. You have way more sophisticated exposures for a municipality. The way that insurance works is Tokyo Marine wants to win this business. They want to take it from travelers. They will give you that carrot, and a lot of times what we see in the market is, it looks great now. What's it going to do next year? It usually comes with a big hike. It's way better to think long-term in the future. Pick your broker, let them, because the market gets oversaturated when you've got a bunch of different people trying to represent you and get quotes. If you pick one, you can create competition. So that would be my suggestion. And again, whether it's us or not, I just think in the best interest of the town, this is how a lot of municipalities your size and larger operate. Pick your broker and let them represent you.
Lee, you represent other municipalities. What do you see other municipalities do?
I've seen them do both. I think maybe New Whiteland even several years back may have done this with choosing a broker first. I'll just have what I've seen for a lot of years is there are a limited number of carriers who provide municipal coverage. We have run into whatever the designated agent or whatever that is, what that is, the one the company will allow to quote on its behalf. But the companies are the companies, and what I think happens is if any one of the agents or brokers asks that company to quote the coverage, the company's going to, and it's going to be that quote, irrespective of who the broker or agent is. We're going to the company, I don't think, is giving a different quote for that coverage because it happens to be delivered to this room by somebody different. It's EMC and it's Tokyo. Whatever, and it's Travelers has done it in the past. But what I've heard from brokers for 30 years is, well, I can't get you a quote. Why? Well, because there's already a different designated agent on that for that company that's assigned to your town. If you want to change, then I can get you a quote. And it really is just shuffling the people who bring that information to us. And then what becomes important to me and what I've experienced over the years is when we do have a claim or we need service, we now are dealing with the local people that provide that. And in some cases, they do a great job of seeing to it that we get taken care of. And that when there's a claim, they respond, you get an email back in a half an hour, and that claim gets submitted and processed and shepherded through the company. And ultimately, we get the service that we hope to get from our local agent. That's what makes them important. I'm not at all persuaded that whoever that turns out to be is going to bring a different number to us. And if I've got that wrong, I've got it wrong. But and I think we know, Jim Wise is gone. We have been dealing with that agency for the last few years. We have had a bad experience. And I don't know that that's a reason to discard them. We have bad days. There are things that change within institutions and companies. But that is our most recent past. That is our most recent history.
Bad experience from Epic, we'll call it the day-to-day operations.
I'm not saying Epic. I thought we were.
That's
Epic. Yeah, Epic.
The
Right.
day-to-day operations has been great. I think Wayne's done a lot more. The claim stuff has been great. The big issue was when they did the renewal. Basically, it was on the way. Jim Wise was on his way out, and John Parmalee on the way in, and basically it was tossed in John Parmalee's lap. We'll call it the week before renewal, and so he was that way. I think that's why, to give them some credit, I don't think that is normal business.
Well, and I dealt with Jim for a lot over the years, and I would say historically always had good experiences with Epic.
Right.
I'm just saying that, and when I say a bad experience, I mean an isolated event that just didn't go as well.
So I wanted to go in a little bit of, kind of what he had said when we had the meeting and we talked about, picking a broker. To me, the big reason why I was a big component of picking a broker based off of a quote wasn't so much more off of, we'll call it the broker, what they can offer. It was the time savings of going out and doing this, and not, to say anything bad on Mayfield because they've been great. We asked them to basically quote. So we gave them what Epic, the information Epic had, we gave it to them to quote off of. Well, I'm just gonna use the one number of, I think it's like $36 million in covered or something, blanket type coverage. Do we need 36 million? Do we need 100 million? I don't know. That's where my thinking was of starting kind of fresh from a broker. Because again, maybe if we only need 20 million worth of coverage, that's even a lower price. But they're quoting based off of Epic's numbers of what they're telling us our coverage should be.
Right, but that's only because to offer you an apples for apples.
For apples to apples. To me, I wanted to almost start, call it from the beginning and say, okay, have the broker come in and let's walk the facilities. Let's look at all of the stuff that needs to be covered and let's get us a good accurate. I know during the Epic thing, you had talked, I think the price that they said this building was worth, and you were kind of dumbfounded, I think, of the amount of money that they're saying that this building needs to be covered on. Well, maybe that's right. Maybe, you're correct, or maybe they are. But we really don't know that. That's kind of where I guess my thought was on picking a broker based on a quote, was because of, I think that was really the best way to do it, was start fresh with a broker. If that's multiple brokers to go through and tell us what we need, then that's what it is. That's kind of was my idea of what I was looking for, type of thing. Because again, if we're short on coverage, we knew we were short with Epic. That's why there was such a big increase. But we're also just taking one person's word for it that we needed to increase it by, double the coverage. Maybe we really didn't. Maybe we were good, but they just, type of thing.
So Epic went through that process before they gave us the quote they gave us?
Very minimal, because again, it got tossed in his lap, and Dwayne and I had noticed that, in our coverage, we weren't covering the playground equipment at Proctor Park. There was other, like memorials at Proctor Park that weren't being covered. There's other things. The plant, I think one of our package plants is being covered for like $500,000, and it's a $5 million plan. So those are things, but it was a very quick process. And that's where, like when we had in our last meeting, where I wanted to kind of have an answer direction to go this month, so that it gave whoever that broker was time to the July time to be able to do all that. But that's...
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Just a couple quick points. These correct on the plane thing, that's when the rubber hits the road, and you had an experience with the tornado where I was there at midnight and till about 4 in the morning, and we had a roof back on in a week when everybody else was waiting on adjusters.
Well, and in fairness to Dean, the tornado came through Mooresville on Tuesday, ripped the roof completely off our building. We had a permanent roof back on by Friday night.
Yeah.
Same week.
Because I went around
Same week.
and said, we're not putting every other truss on. We're not
Right.
gonna
It wasn't temporary. It was the permanent roof.
Yeah. And everybody in town goes, how did that happen? I go, because I didn't listen to the adjuster. And I got my hand smacked, and he goes, that was pretty smart. So anyway, and I've got millions of those types of stories where we show up in the middle of the night. The thing I would tell you, they could be right. The values could be wrong. Those are things that we will look at if we are successful winning the account. We're 16,000 and some change less than travelers. The big advantage with this program is if you sign up tonight, you're gonna save $16,000 for the next 12 months. That's a given. If you buy new equipment, we don't charge you for that. If you buy new vehicles, replace them old with, or new with old, old with new, we don't change it. The price is the price for the next 12 months. Now, at renewal, they pick up those new vehicles and new equipment, and if you added a building as an example, we do charge for that during the policy term. But what municipalities that we do like is they buy 2 new backhoes, they don't get a bill for that. They get, at the renewal, it gets included.
So you don't have endorsements with charges
Yeah.
all year long.
So the certainty is, you're gonna pay $122,000 till the next renewal.
Unless you buy buildings.
Unless you buy a building.
Let me ask you a question, Dean, because I think Matt might have said that there was some kind of a time frame on this one.
Yeah.
What is the drop dead? We have to give you a yes or no.
12th of this month. I think this is the third time we've extended the number, and it did go up after the 1/1, so they were right, the reinsurance cost went up some because of the fires and the hurricanes and all that, but it went up $3,500 or $3,600 on 120,000, so it was pretty minimal actually. So,
Okay, I want to ask both of you,
okay.
because Matt, you're 100% right. If somebody's saying this building is X and it should be twice that, then our numbers, what you quoted doesn't mean anything. Just, I don't mean no offense, but that's just,
And
that's
what I was
realistic.
trying to say when I said it's not you, like, you know, we asked you guys to quote. based on
Exactly.
this.
Okay,
So
so,
that would be something that we will sit down and look at.
okay, so because even at that point, if you, and it could go up.
Could go up. We would tell
So
you that.
my question is, and to be fair to both of you, what kind of a time frame would you need to be able to go with these guys and do a fair assessment, or would you not do that unless you're the broker? Because again, we're back to, you've given us a number, and if, David, if we decide to go with your company, we don't have anything even close. But now, based on what you've said, we don't know that your number is even correct. We could be okay for a year with that number, but that number doesn't mean anything if it doesn't give us the coverage we need, or if it's way over covered. So I'm trying not to drag this out any farther because you're telling us we have till the 12th, but you just screwed with my head, Matt. And that's okay, because I wasn't looking at it that way.
It's come to the 5th, but that's what I've been trying to explain from the get-go as far as the broker goes. I'll be honest, every one of the brokers have been great to work with. I couldn't say, okay, hey, let's go this way, let's go that way, because they've all been great to work with. It was more from a time standpoint on if we go to walk around, and then finding out that, if one broker can't give, they get a quote from this company and they can't get a quote from this company because they've already got one, then it kind of made a little more sense. So I guess regardless of whatever we do, I would say that I would like to, at least walk around and do all that stuff. If you decide to go with Mayfield, I think it needs to be done. And I know like with Gibson, I think the big thing, like you guys had said, you were willing to quote, but ultimately from your guys' business, the way you guys do business, you would rather start out and get those numbers to get an accurate number first. So basically that's why they didn't want to quote originally.
John, you made a comment that, and 100% agree that it is our responsibility to look out for their run. But that's not only looking at the cheaper price. Because in my opinion, when we're looking at this and we're inadequately covered, we're ultimately costing the taxpayers much more than
100%.
a $14,000,
Or if we're overly covered and we're paying trying for insurance, exposed works both ways. But, so that's, I know it doesn't make your guys' decision any easier, but that's, my thought process with it is
I would
that
say
has to be
the
one.
travelers, when the properties were submitted, the underwriter, I just went through this on a large school where we had to adjust the values $16 million because of building so much stuff. The underwriter came back and said, have you looked at these values? And we had to go through each building by square footage, and we agreed and disagreed, and finally agreed on a value with that particular school, the appraiser service that they were using, which had some errors, and then the underwriter. So I am confident, because we represent travelers, that travelers underwriter would have looked at those values, and while they may not be exactly accurate, they're not going to be way off. They would not let you under insure. It should have been 40 million. They're not going to let you do it for 30 million.
And honestly, the companies have such technology today, they can go right in and put the address in and look at that on an aerial view. And
Yeah,
they're calculating that. It's amazing.
is amazing, the technology that they do. So,
I'm gonna bring you to it real quick, cause Joe's standing here. Because, you know, he's from the wastewater side, and I'm just thinking about from cost, just hearing, so we're at basically 36 million is what, like, if we had a total destruction, the whole town, whatever, they're gonna say, okay, here's, basically we can cover up to $36 million, right? I'm gonna ask you this, if something wipes out the wastewater plant completely, is $36 million even gonna touch it?
Completely.
When we've got a packaging plant that is 5 to 6 million by itself, and we've got 2 of them, I mean, that's half the price.
Right. Well, 36 million, pretty close. I mean, I think you'd be.
Well, I was using that just because I know you can throw a number out there, but it doesn't include everything
I
else.
was looking at your rate report there. I thought he had a whole value on all that stuff.
I'd have to look, yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, I would say at 35, 40 million would be, I think that'd be plenty for that size.
But the 35, 40 million is technically covering everything in town, it's not covering just the plant.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, from what our coverage standpoint is, that's what I was just trying to.
Yeah.
I agree with your point that you wanna relook at all of those things, but as of tonight, the coverages you have tonight, we have quoted those exact same coverages and can save you $16,000. So yes, they need to be looked at again probably and reassessed, possibly. I don't think they're that far off. But the point being, your current agent hasn't offered you anything better at this point on those rates. So why not take advantage of that savings and then relook at those things? I mean, why?
even if your values go up, they're not gonna go up $16,000.
Yeah, you're not gonna see that go up.
No.
So would that process start immediately, or you'd look at that at renewal?
We'd start
Now.
And if we decide, okay, it's worth 20 million more than we thought, we can adjust premiums, and if it's worth 10 million less than we thought, we can adjust
Yeah,
premiums?
oh, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, both ways.
Oh, yeah. And we'd be happy to come over and tour with Matt and go through those things. I mean, we got no issue with that.
That's a fairly valid point. You know, we're truly replacing apples to apples and saving 16 grand. With either way we go, we can go through the process we're talking about, looking at the values.
And as far as the broker goes.
Well, because I agree that basically we do need to do that, you know, and reassess what we own. Okay.
So at this point,
Why hasn't Epic been out here to do that?
yeah,
So-
I mean,
so, I mean,
in,
I know John, but
this is just my opinion right now. We've got two people that care about what we do. And I don't necessarily mean to throw our current provider under the bus, but he's not here. So, that says something. So if there's a comfort level with one or the other, we need to get this process rolling. So if somebody wants to make a motion, go ahead, David.
Last time, I just want to encourage you, this deadline is more perception than reality. Your current policy offers the coverages until your effective date is over. I just, knowing, dealing with municipalities, I would just want to encourage you again, broker first, please don't be glued too much by the carrier and the quotes and the, you know, we gotta act now. As someone who cares about this place and lives nearby, I would just say, again, think about process, in-house risk management tools. We just spent the first 20 minutes of this meeting talking about limiting surprises in future budget and stuff. That's insurance. So I just encourage you to think a little bit longer term. And we provided you, Gibson, with the unique starting point and the proactive plan. I hope you had a chance to review that. Again, that is a look into what makes us a little bit different as a broker. So if you have any questions, I'd love to entertain you.
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
So, and it's really more for him. If they decide to say that they go with the Mayfield quote, obviously that doesn't mean you can't stay with the process of looking at these other things. Like, is that something that, you know, if you say you go to multiple different people to look at the values and things like that, I know, John, I think you actually asked, you know, if you're not chosen as the broker, are they still willing to basically put the work in, not knowing that they may not be the broker, I guess? So I guess that's my question, because you could always choose the Mayfield quote and then start that process. because we're saving, we'll call it, since we're halfway, you're saving, $8,000 or whatever, what we would normally be paying. But if we're working towards the other end of it, if it's with Mayfield and with Gibson and Epic, and then at renewal time or at that, I guess, I don't know that makes any sense, what I just said, but.
So at renewal, we're gonna go out, we're not gonna just keep the one carrier. We represent Travelers, Hartford.
We'll look at that at renewal. We
Liberty.
always look at those at renewal.
There's not a lot, to Lee's point, there's not a lot that do municipalities. I mean, it's a smaller pool than some other types of businesses, but we represent all of those carriers.
And back to brokers, I mean, Dean and I have been doing this, over 40 years, nearly 40 years. But I've written municipalities, I've left an agency and gone to another agency that those municipalities followed me. And I'm not bragging, but the level of customer service that I provide, they weren't getting that after I left. Right. And so they followed me to the other agency. And so I'm proud of what we do there. And Lee can attest to that. I've worked with him on some claims on some of those other municipalities. So my level of service is top notch.
Okay, I am going to, unless somebody is ready to make a motion right now, and if you are, speak up, please. If not, I'm going to ask the council in the next 30 days to do some homework, which is going to be give these folks a call, give David a call, talk to them. Because honestly, what this is going to come down to is a gut comfort feeling with, okay, yeah, I mean, I like everything you've had to say, and I think you'll do the best job. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying it may be that. So if we're not ready to make a decision tonight, let us do some homework. It may absolutely change. That's okay, because I think what Matt said is it does make sense, because, when it comes down to what we're doing for those folks out there, may not always be just dollars and cents. So is there anybody has...
Well, I think that one of the things that becomes a difficulty right now for me is that I only have a quote based upon basically what we had coverage on previously. So, I mean, even with that, I'm still going to need to see a comparison, or else...
Well, you have two quotes. You've got Epic, and you've got...
Right.
Yeah.
And we updated ours based on vehicle changes. And
I forgot about Epic, I'm sorry.
And all that stuff.
Well,
I mean, we did, it's not the static that it started with.
Well,
it was vehicle changes up to this point.
I'm going to say a couple things to make a motion. It may die for lack of a second, and that's fine. What we have right now is we have two quotes on identical coverage. One costs $16,000 less per year, and $16,000 in the scheme of our budget's not significant, but it's 11 or 12% savings.
13.1.
13%. It's a 13% savings on a major expense. That said, what Dean said is true, and I think I said from the start, the reason I know Dean is Dean writes the insurance for the bank that I work for. He also writes my insurance, in full disclosure. The one major claim the bank has had was that tornado, and that blew through in Mooresville on a Tuesday. They led us through the process, got us to a company that put the roof back on by Friday night that same week. To me, that speaks an awful lot. That tells me about claims, that tells me about service. And in that light, I'll make a motion that we switch tonight.
To Mayfield?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And based on the 13% cost savings, I will second that motion, because I think we'd be poor stewards of the money if we didn't, since it is apples to apples. But I also agree with Gibson that I think we need to, based on a couple conversations tonight between insurance and levies, I think we need to take a step back. Let's go ahead and save the money currently, but take a step back and do a little bit of projecting out and long-term views. But again, for the short term, I second the motion.
Okay. We have a motion by John Purdy, second by Dennis. Other questions, comments before we vote? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I will vote no, only because of the process, not because of the people involved. 4-1. And thank you guys. David, thank you. I hope This will come up again, maybe in a year. This has been enlightening, so I hope everybody will stay involved.
Yep.
So,
Can I add one thing to this? Your workers' compensation is a little off schedule. It renews in April. So rather than canceling and rewriting that with just such a close proximity to that renewal, I have it's called an agent of record form that would just transfer that at that time, at renewal in April. Can I get a signature on that by chance?
So everything would be with us.
Yes.
You wouldn't have that big.
I think if somebody would like to make that motion, I think if we're gonna do one, we need to keep it.
And it stays the same price,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
That's what I was under the
Yes.
impression when
Correct.
there was a comment.
So it's just transferring,
Because
oh,
we represent that same company, so we can just transfer
oh,
it.
okay, well, in that case, I'm voting.
John made the motion,
I'll second.
second by John Schlotski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5 affirmative.
Thank you, guys.
Who would you like me to have? Put your signature.
Him.
Let John sign it.
Yeah, take your pick.
Off subject, I am a councilwoman too, so what you were discussing with your levy, Morgan County we did apply for the growth appeal, and we were accepted, we got our growth appeal, but we opted not to use it. So that is an option to kind of start that process and then see that your 3-year growth is in line with the growth appeal, and it worked for us. And it didn't raise any taxes.
Yeah,
Just didn't like that levy.
You didn't use it because,
Yet, we're kind of like
but,
you.
but on the growth appeal, your that was the growth appeal, not
Growth
the.
appeal, no annexation or anything.
No, but the growth appeal was a difference in your assessment relative to the state's.
Yes,
Was yours higher?
yes.
So you did have some additional levy you could have imposed,
We could have.
but elected not to.
Elected not to, but.
So why didn't you just take a little of it?
We didn't wanna tax our people any more than they already had. I mean, they'd already hit double whammies with their property values.
No, I get it. I just, if you went through the process,
I know, cause I asked the city, why do we do this?
well, that's what I'm getting. I wanna make a comment, but not make it sound critical. I guess my question is, if you were predisposed not to increase taxes, why would you have gone through
And
the
we
appeal
have a period
process?
of time, as we understand it, we have a period of time, we still can elect to use that.
Okay,
But we have not done it.
That makes sense.
okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
okay,
And I don't know that time period, I can't help you.
yeah, okay,
Different subject, but.
yeah. No, but it's relevant, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you all.
You'll hear from us.
Okay, thanks.
Matt, I'll be in touch.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Lee, other old business?
Well, yeah, and I'll just report on this quickly, because we talked a bit at the last meeting, our fire department was here, about how often they're going to the new facilities over here at VITA and helping with, there's a phrase for it, so, helping people
Lift
who have
assist.
fallen. And they're spending a lot of time and making a lot of runs there. And the question came up, do we have to do that? And are we allowed to charge for these runs because they're not staffed to do this and provide that service on their own? Like we understood they were supposed to have an RN there or something who could supervise this lift assist, and they don't. And I looked at, and we can't. And so I think that the short answer to the question last meeting is, if the town would choose to charge for that service, we can. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. How many, after the first 3 or 4, if there's so many more in a week, if there's more than one in a day, we need to maybe find out whether they have corrected the problem in our staffing in a way that they can do the lift assist themselves. But if it's something that you all want to investigate further, we can do that, and a lot of communities do, and I think this is a conversation that needs to include our fire chief.
Yeah, because here's my whole thing, customers pay to have that service there.
You'd think.
And I'm assuming they're for profit.
Yeah.
Okay, then this might sound crass, it is not meant to be, but given that scenario, every lift assist is on our community versus a for-profit that is, taxing is the only thing.
Something like that
I
makes
mean,
a lot of sense to me.
surfacing, and that's where I thought we were heading last time.
Yeah.
And I thought that we had kind of, did you basically say whether you were checking to see or not? Because I thought this is where we
Yeah,
were going.
that's what he did, he checked.
Okay.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it makes me a little warm looking at it, because when you think that it is a matter of assisting someone who is paying to stay there or having that payment made on their behalf
Correct.
with public dollars in some form or fashion, right? That the facility would be able to assist them when they fall. Two things: they ought to have somebody there because that, and they're down on the ground longer than they would need to be if they had somebody there, because they have to wait until we can respond. So yeah, but I don't know that since our last meeting they haven't gotten someone hired, and now they're doing it themselves. I just don't know the answer to that.
An update on that.
Okay.
I spoke with Steve earlier, he's not here, but he said he may not be able to be here, so he told me. He said that, there's a new lady in charge, and she made, so the rule previously was, if whoever's in charge, she said, if I'm not here, you call them. Well, now the rule is, if somebody falls, call me first, let me know what happened, let me know, all the details, and then that person then says, will you handle it or call 911? So he said it's reduced the number.
Okay, good. So that's something, I guess.
But one thing, just in my pants. One thing, I wasn't grandstanding. One thing I'm looking at though, is that short term, is that temporary, is this a long-term
Yeah, I know.
fix?
A lot of questions.
Which means that I think if we had something in place,
Right.
it incentivized
Right.
them to basically say, this is a permanent structural and systemic change that we have made in here.
Yeah.
And my bigger thing is, that's much better advertisement for them to say, we've got this care here on site immediately when your loved one, falls.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think we definitely ought to continue to
Okay.
pursue it.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Let's-
Thank you.
Let's get Dave involved and,
Okay.
I don't know how much you would charge neither, but.
yeah.
Well, and it's not surprising that there are a number of jurisdictions that have it in place already, and actually charge for other services too. Even to private residences and things with frequency of calls and stuff like that. So, yeah. So anyway, just
Okay.
something that can be done.
Thank you for checking. Chad?
No.
John?
Two things. Why is the rate study not taken off the agenda?
Yeah, sorry. We need to explain, don't we?
You want me to explain so?
Well, I will. You'll better understand it when Joe makes his presentation. Since the rates,
Okay, I can wait.
no, but since the rate study was done,
I think you just answered it because I read the proposal. Second thing, the road study. I got a little information on that, but I don't know that the whole council has. Can you kind of bring the council up to date on where we are?
So the study come back, and it basically stated kind of what we all knew, that there was not gonna be any need for, any additional improvements to, the existing roadway. There are some things taking place now, that are lending itself towards maybe a little bit of a altercation or confrontation or disagreement, however you want to call it.
altercation. I wouldn't go all the way to altercation.
No, I wouldn't go all the way to altercation, however you want to call it.
A disagreement.
A disagreement, but they're coming back, they're stating that they don't want to do ACL-decel lanes, they don't want to do the channelized left turn on Whiteland Road, but that is all something that was approved on the preliminary plat as well as the concept plan. So we're working through some details on that, but rest assured, we do have construction standards that are the minimum requirements. But that's where we are on that. There's, as far as, in short, as far as the traffic study, come back saying that
Wasn't-
nothing is needed.
Wasn't what I was expecting at all by
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
traffic
really
study.
asked.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, you said what we all expected to see that
Yeah.
we don't need, that's not at all what
Yeah.
I'd hate to have that neighborhood in there and try and come by on Whiteland Road while somebody's waiting to turn left. I mean,
Yeah.
geez, that's
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be accidents.
accidents left and right.
Yeah.
So are we potentially looking at litigation to enforce?
No,
No.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay,
I think it's
but-
just, all it is right now is trying to hash things out and figure things out. Because the concept plan and the preliminary plat was done prior to the additional commitments and the way the verbiage and the commitments and stuff were, you know, we're working through things. So it's not an issue at this point.
Let's say, well, you probably can go with that.
I don't wanna belabor it. If what you're saying is they agreed to it in the preliminary, therefore, I'm satisfied. If what you're saying is there's a chance they're not gonna have to do anything, I'm not satisfied.
Well, I think that's where it would go back to, because the things that they agreed to in the preliminary plat, that's part of what we and the plan commission agreed to.
Right.
The traffic study was if there was anything additional that they said. It doesn't mean because they said there's nothing additional that you get to take all this away.
Yeah.
Right.
I
And I
think,
think that's where the disagreement is, Riley. They're stating.
Well, I was just, that's what they're throwing against the wall.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, they're saying the PUD ordinance states this, and it trumps what the preliminary plat.
What, they don't have anything else to say. I mean, if they're wanting leniency and to get out of doing some of the improvements that, have been included in their approved plat, they don't have any other way to advance an argument other than to say that, that the commitment that is a part of the ordinance, that they would make those improvements that were recommended by a third-party traffic engineer. They're claiming that what that means is that's all they have to do. Our position is, you have to do what the ordinance requires, and you have to do what's shown on the plat that we already approved. You made a commitment
Or get a new
to do
approved.
these things, but at no point did you ask for a waiver of the other requirements.
Yeah.
You could have, but you didn't. And at no point did the town give a waiver of the other requirements, so the other requirements still apply. I have communicated that to them in an email, just like that. And if they're going to try to get out of spending some money to make road improvements, they have to make an argument. They have made it to these guys. They have claimed that I'm going to hear about it. I haven't heard a word from anybody. I didn't even get a response to that email. So,
Imagine that.
and it may turn into a dispute, except I don't know how in the world they can be in the business they're in if they turn their attention more to fighting with the municipality than getting on with developing lots.
And I can tell you, you know, obviously we don't have them voted, but our standing thing too then was, this is what you guys said you do. It's in the plan. This is what's gonna be
They're
required
drawn
of
right
us.
on there.
They come to you or the planning commission to try to change it. I mean, that's.
I get that if they're wanting to get out of doing some of this, I don't know what else they could argue other than that. I'm just not persuaded by it.
So your opinion at this moment is whatever their argument is, it has no merit.
Right, and they haven't even advanced it to me or to the planning commission.
right.
Okay.
They've sat down and I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to win Dwayne's favor on something less than what they have already included in their plans.
Right.
If they can persuade Dwayne and Matt that this ought to be good enough and win their support, then they can move through the formal process of some waivers of the construction standards in the ordinance. If they don't get Dwayne's support, they're not going to have they're not going to move this thing any place at all. And I don't know if it turns out that based on engineers' reviews and opinions that something less than what has already been included in their plans is good enough. I don't know that I don't think anyone takes any pleasure in making them do something more than what is needed. But I thought that's kind of where we were to start with.
Yeah.
So, and I think our engineer sitting here would say the same thing.
But if they've already promised
Yeah.
that was there, then I myself, you know, good enough,
Yeah.
we have given on some good enoughs too, and
Yeah,
now
for
we
sure.
have an agreement.
One way to view
So
this,
why good enough?
I get it.
They could have, if
Well,
they agreed to the greatest left turn in the history of mankind, and now is
But-
wanting to change the overpass and everything else.
The difference is though, as what all of us understood was after the zoning ordinance was approved, and the plat was approved, that there was going to be a traffic study done by a traffic engineer. A&F Engineering is sort of the traffic engineer in this market. That was going to be done, and they were going to make recommendations, and the developer agreed. They committed to do whatever A&F recommended. And A&F came back and recommended less than what they had already shown in their plans. And now they're saying, well, since A&F recommended less, we're taking away what we've already included in our plans. Yeah. And what we're saying is you're not taking anything away. You ought to be celebrating and high-fiving yourselves and popping the corks and being all real happy about A&F not requiring that you do anything more.
Exactly.
So that's where we are.
I understand.
And that,
Everything that's being required is basically your town standard.
It is.
Well, that's what the
Yeah.
plan said. This is the standard, that's what should be there, this should be there, this should be there.
right.
And that's all that
So that's
stuff.
all, that was from the get-go.
Yep.
Right, okay.
So,
All right, thank you.
Anything
So
else?
I will apologize for my adjective or my use of words, kind of maybe have blown that out of proportion.
well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that what they may attempt to do, but I
Well, if that changes, or you feel like they're gonna assert some sort of a claim, I'd
Yeah.
like the council to know that as soon as
Oh,
possible.
sure.
you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah,
And when Dwayne first learned that they were going to try to use this study to not do what they had promised to do, he was running a little hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
No
me
way.
too.
I'm telling you, I didn't even want to stand by because it was steam coming
Steam.
out of his ears.
I don't have a temper, I don't know what anybody's talking about.
You're passionate.
But some things piss me off though, right? Sorry, we're being recorded.
Passionate is
Yeah,
good.
and we have a reporter here
That's
too.
all I've got.
Nope.
Headline story.
Oh, business.
Dwayne,
Yo,
where's my top part sign?
I will get that installed, I did fail you on that.
Do we
My
have
apologies.
it? We,
I do have it.
okay,
I do have it.
if it's on site, then I'll just
Yeah.
blame you.
Yeah, we got it, it's all on me.
Matt, old business. Dwayne. Angela, was your 12 things you've got old or new?
New.
Okay, good. New business, the biosolids dewatering project.
Okay, so Joe Tierney with GRW Engineering, we talked a few times in here, so you guys kind of know him, but just kind of to give you a little bit of background. So we give them, they had submitted a study that they had done on our biosolids and dewatering system back in September. This is kind of the this what he's gonna talk about, Peter, is kind of the next step in the process, depending on kind of your funding source and things like that we would go with. So let you talk.
Okay, so, yeah, so as Matt said, so we've done several things out at the treatment plant. We built a new UV system for you, and then, talked with Matt, last year we did that biosolids study. Basically what that is you've got a rotary press that takes the sludge, squeezes it out, right, and then they dry it out and put it in the dumpster and take it away. Well, it's old equipment. It's been a maintenance issue. Wanted to look at what some options were to improve that stuff, that equipment. So we did look at that. And one of the things, so we looked at the equipment and we agreed the equipment is old. It doesn't produce that high of a concentration of sludge, so you're paying more for the disposal because you got more of it. But one of the things we noticed and called out is that building is not per NEC code. Okay, I mean, and I know we were talking about this, and our electrical engineer was out there, and that's a big deal. It doesn't meet the code, so if there was an accident there, and for example, you've got that sludge coming in the classifier, you've got a unit heater, a gas unit heater, or a pilot right there. If there was any kind of gas, like any kind of fumes or something got into the sewer and came in there, boom, that's a problem. I mean, I don't know how else to put that to you, but that should not be. That should be addressed. The building isn't that big, so it doesn't offer a lot of space. It's in a floodway. So looking at all that, one of the ideas is that relocate a new building up out of the floodway and put the new biosolids equipment up in that area. So we've looked at a couple of different options of centrifuges, belt presses, rotary presses, and so forth. And I think we came out with, I think the centrifuge was the recommended one. They produced the highest concentration of sludge. My recollection is that the project cost is in the $3 million range. So we talked about, obviously the next thing is, well, how are you gonna fund that? You know, would you fund that in-house, or would you go through the SRF program, the State Revolving Fund program? Well, in order to do that, if you wanna go that way, you've gotta prepare an application, submit the application, then prepare a preliminary engineering report that addresses that issue. And I think we've talked about this before. One of the other things we did for you last year was kind of did a preliminary study of, well, how much capacity do you have left? With this 400 and something homes coming in here, how much capacity would you have left to handle anything else? So we put together some numbers with assuming those 420, 430 homes would come in there, and you have a couple spaces where you might get some fill-in growth. If all that were to occur, you'd be pushing the 80% range, as I recall, 80% range. And so that leaves you room, you know, and at 90%, in a community that's at 90, if your capacity reaches the 90% mark, and you're looking to add more growth, IDEM's gonna ask you, you know, are you planning to expand that plant or whatever, or otherwise, if there's a point where they'll start imposing a sewer moratorium. They won't approve more connections because you're too close to the capacity. You're not there yet, and the numbers we use to predict the flows are pretty conservative in today's world. The newer construction techniques usually reduce that flow. So you're probably okay if you take no more growth after these homes. And how long will these take these homes to develop? It's hard to tell. 3 years, 5 years. My guess would be somewhere in that 3 to 5 year range. So in talking through this, so you've got the biosolids, which I think is, if I would call it a more immediate need. Does the plant need to be expanded? Well, maybe in the future it might. It depends if there's any other growth you would consider. I mean, we've talked a little bit in speculation about, well, would you ever consider accepting flow from something to the west that's not part of town? But if there was a developer that was interested and wanted to work with you, would you consider that? You know, and then what would the deal on that be? Would you put the line out there? Would they come back to you? How would that work? So we've talked through that and threw some numbers at, you know, if we put a pump station out there, a force main, how much that would cost, and that kind of thing. Part of the process would be go through step by step of the existing units and go, well, do we need to fix anything else up here, so on and so forth. Look at the pump stations and put some numbers to them in terms of, are they good for the next 10 years, are they good for the next 20 years, we need to replace that. And that will all come in the final report, recommendations on projects, you know, biosolids. We'll upgrade those costs since they're a year old now, but you know, top recommendation might be, we recommend you consider doing the biosolids project. So much money for that. You can do it in a phased approach, you know, maybe it really would lend itself in the sense that if you know, as this development goes forward, and then if there was another development, it would be a number of years out before you would need to make a treatment plant upgrade. Depending, you know, we can certainly project if the cost is this much now, how much it might be in 5 years, 10 years, and so forth. And then if there was a line sent out there. So we were kind of thinking, well, okay, so you do the biosolids project, and then in a couple of years, you come to agreement that you want to extend service out somewhere, you do that project. And then you know, in that planning period, well, the last thing you might do then is, as that growth, you got the 400 homes here, you got some new homes coming in here. At what point do you have to pull the trigger to add that third package plan? The way you know, we're looking at I was looking at this the other day. I mean, you've got that nice flow splitting structure there. It's all set to put another one right over there. You know, at one point we were talking, and I had just the engineering saying, well, we just put a whole new XPR plant or something out there. Well, that would be a pretty significant cost. Yeah, and you are set. You've got the 2 units, and you've got that line set there. You are set to do that at a relatively a cost-effective way to do that instead of scrapping everything and putting a brand new plan in there. So I mean, the PER would outline all that, and then you would make a submittal to ICOM. They would review it, and then you get on their funding list. They all, and I will tell you, I mean, your rates are low, your income is relatively high, you're not a disadvantaged community. I talked with the IFA people just the other day, and so you would qualify. I think just looking at it would be 2.6% loan. It would be the interest rate right now, I think is what it's looking at. It's a tiered thing, right? It's user rate, income level, and then that you kind of find your way where you are and what percentage you would get there. So, you know, it's a below market rate that you would potentially qualify for. Here's how this works now, and this is where we're at. So if we were to move ahead, they are accepted, and you can submit your PER any time of the year. You can put it in any time, and then they have what they call pooling funds after the priority list. That is not as good of an interest rate. I think it's 0.5% different. It's a little bit higher than the PER would have to be submitted by April 1st to be ranked to see if you would get out this year's project priority list. That's 7 weeks and 4 days from now.
You got this, right?
But we don't, it doesn't have to be, I was just telling Matt before the meeting, it can go in as a draft to them to start ranking it. Because what we have to do for complete is we have to get a form signed, authorized signatory. You probably remember this, you might went through this just a couple of years ago. Then at some point after the final PR is done, we present it to you, there's a PER acceptance resolution, there's a public meeting that has to go on. So all that stuff kind of takes a little time at the end of the job. We would bring in your rate report, your rate consultant. He's done a rate, you've got $36 rate, you're looking at some kind of a modest increase. Well, what if we come into them with a $4 million project? What does that do to your rates? You know, and they would eventually want to see that in the PER as well, is that, you know, that you're going to do it. One of the questions on the application is, are you going to fund this whole project with an SRF loan, or are you going to use local? Is there some participation of local funds or ARPA funds or whatever that is? You know, I don't think we're going to combine it with an Oprah grant or a USDA loan or anything like that. But there would be that kind of stuff. Is there some kind of local participation that would help lower that loan a little bit? So, you know, so if we were to move ahead, there's an application which I started to draft out. We'd have to sign. We'd sign that and submit that. That's an estimate of what we think the job's going to be. The number can be whatever, you know, what we reasonably think was. We can always revise that after the fact and put that in there. You guys had a loan in 2018 with it, so talk with them. You don't have to have a project kickoff meeting with the SRF representatives unless you so choose to do that. That is kind of I don't think you need to do that, quite frankly. So, so that would be, that is the mechanism for moving this forward, unless you said to me, oh, we got $5 million, we want to go ahead and design it and build it ourselves, and we can do that, but I don't think that's the case.
So
Okay.
what are we still using that little building where you had to slide the machine in and you two have to stand like this because it's too small,
So yes,
and doing the
that's-
hockey pucks?
I never really make it into hockey pucks.
They used to be at one point.
It looks like Brownie makes it.
Okay.
To be honest with you, but yes, we are still using that, which I think
You're gonna get
it was
that
put
right,
in-
right?
It's only been 16 or 17 years roughly is with that piece of equipment. It's got roughly I think what they get for me is 15 to 20 year lifespan is what that equipment that we have there is. I just put the Fournier. Yes.
Is that the one that we got from Canada?
Yeah.
I still have the business card because It's my favorite business card of all time, and the guy that says on there, "We squeeze the crap out of water."
That was Tom,
That's what it says right on the business.
You like that one?
Yeah,
She's writing that down too.
yeah, put that in there. Headline.
Let's call that guy.
Out of water.
So, okay, number one, do we have a place for this new building? If it's in a floodplain and we need to move it,
So in the study that they submitted in September, they gave there's a map actually of a potential layout for expansion of the plant. And yes, there's a place for this, there's a place, if ever we need to expand to another package plant, we kind of have that all laid out in a diagram, I guess.
Right, we mapped out where the floodway is and so forth, and looking at them, if you're standing there looking at the building, looking west, kind of looking up to the north, and just getting it up off out of and I think we're gonna tear that other building.
I know what you're doing.
If we're end up being able to do something with the brick, because if not, we'll have to find somewhere that district that's in there as well, if you remember right, so. When that's all
No,
in
I'm
that
talking about the
PDR.
other building, that Pistagram thing's gotta go.
Yes.
We're gonna move that somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay. So honestly, I don't know that we really need to go a whole lot farther with this, because if you're saying, number one, the building's not adequate and it's not safe, and if the machine is 17 years old and the life expectancy is 15 to 20, we've got the life expectancy. We need to look at something,
Right.
okay? And, maybe between now and then, there's this miraculous new invention that comes out that does it for half the $3 million. But the 34.5, do you have that to?
So in my annual budget, I always budget a minimum of $50,000 for engineering and architectural fees, and that's what I have in there is $50,000 right now.
Okay, it's the first week of February. Do you have anything on the horizon? I mean, and your projects are big projects, so it's not like we're gonna get to July and you're just going, oh my gosh, this big huge project came up that we got to do. Probably not.
So unless there ever becomes just an emergency, and to me that's something a little different. But that's kind of where this $50,000 was kind of. My idea for allocation was to move forward from the September study.
Okay.
And then the PDR would lay out what
And Joe just come in cheaper, so.
construction, engineering, there'll be bonds and all that kind of thing, and bond closing, if you eventually proceed to that point.
So this PER does more than just allow us to get in line for the state revolving fund, right?
Well, it's a planning, it's a preliminary engineering report, it'll lay out the things that we're talking about here, costs and so forth, and like for example, as we work through this process, if we say, well, let's look at expanding the plant year 5 from now, we'll put together we'll lay out a little plan for where that would go, what that cost is now, we'll project what that cost would be out there.
Well, the reason I'm asking is we understand a project we need to do, we understand the approximate price. The question becomes, how do you pay for it?
I'm sorry.
This gets us in line for SRF.
Yes, I'm sorry.
But what if we said, we've got the reserves and just want to pay cash for this $2 million project? Do we need to do this piece still?
Not to that level, no.
So,
And I'm just talking out
I
loud.
got some numbers from Angela, and she may be able to say, we don't have that in reserves, specifically from the utility. And I think even if you add in everything, really from the town, we wouldn't have 100% coverage of a $3 million project, correct?
We have like $1,750,000 left from the sale of the water utility.
Okay, and that was the nature of my
Right, and
question.
then I think I got $300,000, it's kind of in my, we'll call it the capital improvements, which
Right.
this would fall into that as a capital improvement.
But if
So-
then therefore we said we're going to use $1 million out of that, borrow $2 million, we have to do this. Is
You
that?
have to, yeah, I do think you need to, this first one, you need to look at very seriously because of the things I said. To your point, what'll come down here is when we get the numbers fine-tuned for the let's just talk the biosolids, and we say, okay, here it is, here's the project, here's what it's all gonna cost. And if you take this, if you can get this loan, it's gonna mean that, I'm just making a number up here, but it means an $8 a month increase to your users if you take this much long. Then you guys have, if you have money here that you wanted to say, hey, we'll kick in $1 million that our loans down here that lowers that rate to, that increase to 5, then that's something we would, you would work with the rate consultant, the clerk treasurer and so forth before we close on any kind of final loan and all that kind of thing.
Well, and speaking of, and that's why I assumed the rate study was
Yeah,
off the
yeah.
agenda. But let me ask you, let me go a different direction. There were 2 purposes in that rate study. One was the rate, the other was the hook-on fee.
Yeah.
Is there any reason not to proceed with the hook-on fee piece of that?
Well, we talked about that too, and one scenario was going to be to go ahead and hold the public hearing tonight just on that, and go ahead and adopt an ordinance to increase that, and then let the other hang until we figure the rest of this out. And so I talked about Reynolds, and I said, I asked him if the cost of these improvements would be included in the historical costs of the plant and affect what the sewer availability fee would be. And he said, if you finance it all, it won't. If you spend some of your own money, the capital that you spend yourselves will go into, because it's being spent immediately rather than financed over a term, that then say we take $500,000 of our own money and add it to this project. That $500,000 gets added to the historical cost of the plant, and then that gets spread out over the availability fee, which would increase it slightly, but it would affect it. So I said, okay, let's have this presentation. We don't need to have that availability fee adopted until someone's ready to pull a permit for a new home. That's when it becomes important.
That's probably gonna be in the next year though, right?
Yeah,
Is all this
but
gonna
you
firm
can
up
but you
in
can
that
adopt
next
it in the next 30 days.
Right, but I mean, is all this gonna firm up in that next 12 months? I mean, are we gonna know what we're gonna do and how we're gonna finance it? And...
Well, I don't know.
I would-
well, the next
I would
12 months,
hope we-
absolutely.
yeah.
But whether,
Okay,
but yeah, I think the answer to that's yes.
okay.
But we have been in just, I'm just going to say this and laugh as much as you want, but we the three of us talk about not at least having it seem to these home builders like we're lying in the weeds and jump up and surprise them a week before they pull the first permit and increase our availability fees from $1,100 to $2,400. We think it's courteous and we think it's good for them to be able to plan. Well, we really do. That if it's going up to $2,400, that they have some lead time before they start trying to price their homes and their lots, so they know it.
Yeah.
So the reason that we want or eager to get that done is so we can make it known to Gradison and Lennar and Ryan that as you prepare all of this, be aware it's going up.
Yeah.
So in that regard, we'd rather do it sooner. But the other way to get at that issue is to say to them, it's coming. We have an estimate that it's going to be $2,400 to $2,500 to $2,400 to $2,600 or something, and we can assure you that before you pull a permit, it's going to be somewhere in that range, so plan accordingly. And I think rather than hurry up and do that, let's learn more about these numbers. Let's do an amended rate study, adopt the ordinance, and as we're having conversations with our Gradison and the others now, just tell them it's in the pipeline and it's inevitable, it's coming, and roll that into your numbers and deal with it that way. Does that sound all right?
That is actually already been told.
Well, that's right.
Started the race.
That's right. I
There was
think
no-
at the
there was
very
no
outset.
price telling them, but they knew that we were looking at our rates and they.
And the other thing we know,
our
too, is-
availability fees would change.
The other thing we know too is they all are paying availability fees in other communities that are quite a bit higher than what ours is going to go up to.
Oh, yeah.
So but anyway, yeah, that's the whole big explanation.
Okay.
So that's why we took it off the agenda. And yeah, at the beginning of the meeting, I probably should have said that because you saw it just go away.
Right.
But this is why.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so you have a funding mechanism, okay? I'm looking at the letter you submitted, and it's really nice the way you guys wrote this, proposed fees. As compensation for the service described in attachment 1, GRW respectfully requests the following lump sum fee of $34,500. Can we respectfully say 25? I'm messing with you. But it was just so nice the way you put it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was respectful.
it was just really nice the way you guys put that.
I was gonna say, you can respectfully request that.
Let
and
him
they will
answer the question
respectfully
before you let
reject
him
it.
off the hook.
Yeah. Would anyone like to make a motion at this time to approve the contract with GRW?
I will make a motion to approve the contract with GRW for this
34.5.
34.5.
Okay, Dennis, Chad, second. Other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5 affirmative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here and enlightening us. I didn't realize our equipment was in that bad a shape.
John, I will tell you that, you know, when we did the study, I was hoping to get a few more years out. I think even John Purdy and I talked about, you know, the hope was to get a few more years out of it. The last few months have told me that's probably not gonna happen.
Yeah.
I think roughly in December, between multiple repairs we had to make, it was almost $10,000 in repairs that we had to make on it, between 2 parts. One of the big things I hate about it is the service side of it. It's a Canadian-made product. They don't have service techs in the United States.
Do they not anymore? I thought they did at one time.
I shouldn't say they don't have one. I guess he's up in Maine, but everything has to go through Canada. They make you.
It might as well be Canada if it's Maine.
Well, where I was going is
Oh,
really? Is like, you know, it's a minimum regardless of
Oh,
it's a
right.
$500 fix.
Wow.
It's a minimum like $5,000 because you're paying for their hotel fees
Yeah.
and their travel expenses.
Yeah.
For them to send some out. I'll tell you, I had one email and a text message and a phone call, and they charged me $750.
Wow.
Because it's a 2-hour minimum. 2-hour minimum.
Wow.
Of tech support.
Just to ask, because you're probably up on all of this stuff, the equipment that you would probably recommend for this project, is it somebody that's within reason?
Locally, you mean?
Yeah.
All above. You're saying it's a centrifuge, right?
Yeah, well, there's, and you know, and I know that we talked about, we looked at 2 different centrifuges. I know there's another one, HB Thompson, that you were talking about. So there's 3 or 4 reps locally that, and they're good reps. I mean, the Flatwick is a good guy too, Dwight Thompson. So they're local guys. You know?
Okay, cool.
And they work in this industry through all these communities here. So
that would be my biggest sticking point, is making sure that we have the service and somebody here that's going to be able to.
They spin the water out of crap. That's going to be it, right?
Nice.
That'd be their business.
Nice.
I'm
Okay.
saving that business card when I get it.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it, Joe. That is everything under new business. Lee?
No.
Anything new? Chad? John? No. Dennis?
I think this would be new business. Based on Adam talking and then the insurance, and I'm gonna chalk this up to maybe I don't ask the right questions. I would, as we start getting ready for our budget cycle, and I figure these 2 guys probably have more answers than I have questions. But when we get ready for the budget cycle, can we sit down and talk to the fire department, for example, and say, where do you see the department in 2, 3, 5 years? What are your costs gonna be? Do they wanna expand more
And
personnel?
I know these guys could do that for sure. And
I figure they probably already have, or at least have a vision for it, whether it's, and that's why I'm saying, maybe I've never asked the right questions.
That's a great
Same
idea.
with Joe, until the new subdivision goes in, I don't see Joe needing, much in the line of staffing, but, again, where does he look at vehicle replacement over the next, instead of doing it, I think we've looked at it too short term and not, let's start projecting out that 3-5 years.
I will answer from my side, and I'm gonna answer from Matt. We would love to be able to do that, to sit down and this also ties into a conversation that John Purdy was talking about self-funding. I just want to be careful, because I don't think the council is of the understanding of some of the projects that have come to light that could be a big cost to New Whiteland moving forward that we are not planning for. And that particular thing is the bridge on Sawmill Road. So that whole debacle with the county handing us the bridge, we just got the inspection report of it 2 weeks ago. I have a meeting on Friday with the engineer to go over the report, but it's currently recommended for replacement. Okay, currently the cost on that is $1.5 million. I think that is way low, in my opinion, but where are we gonna fund it? Now, I understand that we can get loans, but, and maybe you guys can answer this, but maybe it's easier to pay for stuff out of pocket for something like that than to get a loan for MVH funds that's gonna wipe out MVH for years to come, and the ability to do stuff where, you know, he can self-fund or, you know, get loans through his side. Just some things to think about, but to your point, now you're gonna have an understanding of what is gonna, major projects are gonna be coming down the pike in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, they didn't do us any favors when they did that. There was method to their madness. So,
So,
I think that's a great point. We just need to plan to do that.
As we get closer, yes.
John?
Nothing.
Matt?
I don't know.
Blaine?
so I do, and it's regarding an email that you guys all saw regarding the vehicle. You know, the fire department has gotten their vehicle transferred over to them. I think they're already using it.
Yeah.
Since then, we have looked, well, a week or so ago, we got quotes on vehicles. I know you all, some of you replied back. Some had questions, and I wanted to clarify some of those since we are now sitting here at the meeting. Did get 3 quotes. It was all for an F-250. That is what I requested them to quote. Andy Moore Commercial Ford is the only one that has the utility bed, as well as the truck that has the snowplow prep package. That's at a cost of $58,685. Ray Skillman Ford didn't have an F-250. They priced us out an F-350. That's going to be, their price on it is $51,000. It did not have a bed. That's an additional $10,000. So you're $61,000 there. Hubler Ford in Franklin, they had an F-250. It did not have a bed. So you had to put a bed on it, $10,000, and it also did not have the snowplow prep package. So when I said Andy Moore Commercial Ford is the only one that had everything that we want, that's kind of what I meant by it. It wasn't that, you know, there was a cheaper, you know, we were trying to stick with an F-250 even though there was an F-350 available. But anyway, coming to you to ask you for the approval to purchase the truck from Andy Moore Commercial Ford.
How much is the Andy Moore?
$58,685. And something else to think about also the permission in doing, if you do allow the purchase of the truck, approve the selling of the Dodge 1500, that offsets some of the additional costs over what Matt has in his budget.
So that's something too, so if you guys remember right, at budget time, we were gonna cut some money. I got a jump runner from the fire department's budget, and it was brought, you know, to your attention that, hey, I've got money in our budget to purchase a vehicle, instead of basically getting rid of one, we can give it to the fire department. That's kind of where we're at. So I have $50,000 what I have budgeted in my budget for a vehicle specifically. And then as Dwayne said, with your permission, we would sell the Dodge 1500, which is 2009 Dodge 1500, on Gov Deals, like we've done with the police cars and some of the other equipment that we've had, to make up the rest of that, or get as close as we can. So.
Questions? Comments? We have a motion to approve the purchase.
I'll make the motion.
Chad? We have a second?
I will
Dennis?
second.
Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5 affirmative.
Just to clarify, was that to approve the purchase and to sell?
Yes.
Like all combined them
Yeah.
together?
Yep. Okay, the floor is yours.
I have 2 that are easy. One, I did not scan this to you guys, so I apologize, but it's a customer who's asking to be taken off cash only, and per the rule, after a year of no penalties, they can submit a letter to council asking asking to be taken off cash only. I have their letter and I have their history of on-time payments for a year if you wanna pass it and take a look at it. I don't know if we usually vote on it or if they just.
I don't.
Yes, we
Just
do.
Typically, yeah, it's a motion and vote.
So it fits our policy.
Yeah.
Proceed.
Right.
I'll make the motion. that we approve it.
Motion by John Purdy,
Second.
second by John Shalotski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5 affirmative. See how easy that was? What else do you have?
That one was easy.
Oh,
And just
no.
make sure I get that before we leave.
This one's
If
gonna be
anybody wants a
complicated.
copy, I'll scan it. Every year we do the bond filings, the bond renewals, and I need for you guys to do a motion to renew them. Currently, I only have Kim's and mine. We don't have Cindy and Melissa's yet, but also, and I don't know if this was a new requirement or what, but every council member is supposed to sign it, I guess, so. That's
Okay.
what said, so I have the lines for you guys to do it, so I'll need a motion and
Yeah, because they do have to have the bonds. We have a motion.
renew these two bonds.
So moved.
Motion by John Shalotski,
Second.
second by Chad. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5 affirmative.
And then before I start my third one, I'll just give these to you guys so you can sign them. Okay, my third thing, I talked to John Purdy about this today because it's a bank thing. But I mailed our credit card payment on January 8th, and it included a general check and a wastewater check. And I mailed it priority mail, because we've been having some issues with the mail lately, which apparently, there was a email thread on the listserv today. It's widespread, it's not just here. A lot of it has to do with the storms that we had, and also I guess there was a recent restructuring in the post office. Yay! But anyways, I mailed it priority mail on the 8th. I noticed on January 24th it still had not reached its destination. And so I had to call and make a phone payment on our card so that our cards would not cancel. So I did that. Then last week, it looks like Friday, January 31st, a teller called into our office and said that one of the checks had been altered to have someone's name on it, and they had added a 0. So they were trying to cash a big check. Fortunately, we have positive pay on our account, and that was one of the big things that made it where they tried to push it through, and we were like, no. And so the problem that we have now is in that same envelope was also a wastewater check, and at least so far we haven't seen where that check has tried to come through. But so I talked to Lauren today after I talked to John Purdy. He said to do, whatever she recommended. She said that, usually best practice when this occurs is to start a new account, and she said that if we did not have positive pay, she would say that that's what we have to do. But she said that because we have positive pay, she recommended that we wait 30 to 60 days and kind of just see how things go. She also recommended that I download the bank app on my phone, because she said we need to check positive pay every day, because any day now that other check could potentially be coming through.
See, I did that. You have to call the bank and cancel the checks.
We did
Yeah.
put a stop payment on
Yeah.
those
Yeah,
checks. As soon as this happened, Missy did a stop payment. But I did download the app, and I'm to where I can look every day, but there's like a window between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. where if somebody
It
tries
could be, yeah.
to
But I don't know if
cash
there
something
would- it seems like there's a
fraudulently,
regulation that says we can't do ways.
if we miss that window of time, then it just
I'll
automatically
I'll
goes
try and look
through.
into that.
So, I've taken all the precautions that, I was told to take. Like I said, she said to wait 30 to 60 days and see. I was gonna bring it to you guys, and, because it's, yes, we could, you know, close those 2 accounts and make new ones. We could do that. There is a lot involved in doing that. She also said that, we could close these accounts, start 2 new ones, and someone else could do this same thing to the new account like a week later. So, just by making new accounts won't prevent us. But the big thing is we have positive pay, so.
Well, and you're right. When you hand somebody a check, they've got everything they need right there.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think on the positive pay, I think it's pretty crucial that somebody checks that every single day. That can't be an occasional thing. That's got to be an everyday thing.
And I believe that Missy was doing that every day.
Good.
The thing is, I think she was gonna be off tomorrow, which I'm like, oh, okay, somebody needs to check it, like,
Right.
every day whether she's here. So they told me to download the app. I can go on there and easily see anything that comes up that's flagged.
Yeah, and Lauren, for what it's worth, is the expert at the bank on treasury management. Right. And what I told Angela is I realize it's a pain in the butt to change accounts, but if she says you need to, we need to. She's apparently said it's not necessary, so I'm willing to go. She's the expert on that stuff.
Right. Yeah. She said, like I said, if we didn't have positive pay, she would have said we have to. But that kind of helped us there.
Good.
What about ACH payments on this sort of thing going forward?
Well, that's what we were just talking about. Is there?
Yes. So going forward, we are. We talked to the credit card company last week, and we have created an online account where I'm going to start paying them online. Because I've been, there's a few payments that I've been paying priority mail, and I've been paying it out of my pocket just because I'm like, it's not the town's fault, whatever. But, things like with the credit card, some of our vendors, if it's a little bit late, it's okay. It's, they understand that I have to wait for claims to be approved. So if something's due on the 6th and you approve it on the 5th, they understand. Credit cards are different because if it's not there by that day, then we're having late fees, we're having interest, and then the guys can't use it because we have only so much we can use, and so until they get the payment. So Missy and I decided to start paying that one online.
Yeah, perfect.
So no more priority mail that's not even working anyway.
Yeah. The least amount you have to send in the mail as far as checks. I mean, I don't mail checks for anything anymore. Nothing.
Yeah.
So I would say the more that you can put over to where you go to the bank and count on your computer and pay it that way. You could program stuff out. I do that when the bills come in. I don't want it to go for 2 weeks, so I program it for 2 weeks from now, and then I don't have to worry about it. Nobody gets checks anymore. So if that's doable, I would set up everybody that way that you can. My wife had that problem where she worked and before positive pay, and they were having fits every day. She was getting like 4 and 5 checks.
Yeah, it's become a lot more common.
Yeah.
Especially in the last 90, 120 days, it's become it's boomed.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say also, Juan told us to go ahead and file a police report, and so, and I asked him, like, where do we file that, here or there, like, where it happened, or here, and he said to file it here in New Whiteland, so we did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, because if whoever put their name on there, they're going to try to cash it somewhere, or they did try to cash it somewhere. So.
Right.
Anything else?
That is all.
Oh, good. We do not need to do this ordinance tonight then either, do we?
Right.
Okay. That is everything on this evening's agenda. The meeting is open to the public. If you have a question or comment, we ask for your name and address for the record. Wonderful. Meeting is adjourned.
Well, she can ask questions too.
Yeah, you can ask if you want.
The only checks we write in our house, one to church, one to New Whiteland Utilities.
I don't even do church anymore. You don't have to write it to utilities. I send mine goes through the bank. Now, it takes a week, where most of mine are 2 days.
Yeah.
But I've got
If you would have told me that's where you were going with that, well, you did a nice thing there, though, by
We
exposing,